Hello, and welcome to the Turn by Turn podcast. We are actually between our season 1 and our season 2, but Alex and I got a unique opportunity to talk with the game creators of the game Quartet, which is a JRPG that's in the process of being kickstarted right now. So the folks at 6.5 were nice enough to let us have a bonus episode in between seasons. So the following is our interview with Pat and Tyler, which are two members of the dev team, and we're really excited to share it with you. For any new listeners, please check out our backlog of Season 1 episodes. We've talked some Pokemon, some Fire Emblem, some Golden Sun. We've gotten into some different game dev topics. If you're new, thank you so much for giving us a chance, and we hope that you stick around to see. We have a lot of stuff set up for season 2, and we're really excited to share it with you guys. So enjoy the interview. Pat and Tyler, what is going on?
Hey, everybody.
Not much. Happy to be here. Thanks.
Great. Thanks for coming on. So you guys are the creators of Quartet, and tell us a little about yourselves.
Sure. My name's Tyler Mire. I'm primarily a composer and musician by trade. And about 8 years ago, I started a little studio with some old buddies of mine called Something Classic, and we make retro turn-based JRPGs. Our current game, Quartet, is on Kickstarter, and we're developing that through the next year or two.
I'm Pat Holleman. I'm the author of the Reverse Design series, which is a set of 6 books analyzing classic video games academically with a lot of data-driven stuff, and including 3 JRPGs, Chrono Trigger, Final Fantasy VI, and Final Fantasy VII, which is how I met Tyler when he read the Chrono Trigger book. And then after they produced Shadows of Adam, Tyler and I got started on a new game, and that was Quartet, and we've been working on that since the end of 2017. Trying to apply all of that academic JRPG knowledge to a project. I'm a full-time game dev, actually, but not on this game. This is just sort of our passion project on the side of the kind of game that we've always wanted to make, which is a Golden Age style JRPG, character story driven, not too crunchy and not too long. It's a game for people who have jobs and can't play 40 to 60 hours anymore because they have mortgages and kids and errands to do.
Mm-hmm. So are there other people involved in the project, or is it primarily you two?
Yeah, the team for Quartet is 5 people, me and Pat, and then our 2 programmers, Peter and Ty Darren, both great, excellent programmers, some of the best in the business. And then our art director, Tim Windorf. He is a wonderful pixel artist, and he kind of supervises a couple pixel artists under him. So yeah, 5 of us, and then we have a lot of outside collaborators and contractors we work with as well, but primarily just us 5.
Mm-hmm. So you're obviously game designers already. What made you want to keep going with your own game on the side on top of all the other games that you're working on?
Well, one thing I'll tell you is that when you work on somebody else's game, a lot of your creative decisions get rolled back. You really have to paint inside the lines, and that's true if you want to succeed in any game. You can't just do whatever you want. That's very much a hobbyist thing to do. I'm going to make whatever game I want, do whatever I feel like. That could be a good outlet, but it's hard for other people to play that sort of game. But when you're working for somebody else for a paycheck, which is what I do full time, they have a lot of lines that you need to be inside of, meet a lot of goals that they have, and a lot of times those goals change over time, and you can accomplish a creative goal that they set out for you, and then the next a few months later or a year later, those creative goals are reversed, and you have to redo a lot of that stuff because it's just the commercial part of the business. No complaint in terms of as far as jobs go. It's the best job I've ever had, being a full-time game dev, but it's not the place that can be your true creative outlet. It's something you do as a creative person. And I'm glad to be able to do that full time. And I do get a lot of satisfaction out of it. But if I want to make the piece of art that I want to make, that I envision, it's going to have to be on my own dime.
Mm-hmm. So this game is obviously called Quartet for all the listeners that missed it the first time around. So what's like the elevator pitch or like 2-minute summary of Quartet?
Sure. So Quartet is a JRPG for people with jobs and responsibilities. It's a nice 20-hour game with no grinding, saving anywhere, etc. All the modern convenience features that might make the game a little snappier. The basic plot premise is that it kind of opens up like a Wild Arms 3, where you could select between 4 chapters in any order. So a non-linear intro where there's 4 characters and you select their stories. And then once all those stories are completed, the storylines sort of converge into one grand like FF6 style plot. So that's the long and short of it for Quartet.
Mm-hmm. So something that stuck out to me was actually nothing specifically about the game, which I'll get to that later. But the immediate thing that stuck out to me is I am a Mac user. I don't have a PC. So all the other developers I've spoken to don't have Mac versions yet. But you guys have a Mac version. So I was actually able to play your demo, which like seems like something fairly small. But like it was actually very cool to actually be able to play one of the games. Because if
you had a friend with Linux, he could have played it too. Because our programmers are just that hardcore.
Yeah. Mac can be infamously hard to develop for sometimes, but yeah, I think this build wasn't especially challenging. And so yeah, we were happy to kind of make it as available as widely as possible. I'm a Mac guy too. I'm actually on a Mac right now, so.
I could say too, what stuck out to me, it was that when you're loading into a demo for an unfinished game, a lot of the times you have no idea what quality level you're going to be looking at. But the second I dropped in, all the art looks really crisp and clean and nice. And I took like 2 steps forward, and I think it was a bassoon started playing, and I used to play that.
Oh, nice.
A lot, but the soundtrack just sounded so finished and nice. So
my wife's instruments over there.
I see.
Not a bassoon, but bass clarinet. Close enough.
Yeah, I kind of still get those two confused sometimes. But the the soundtrack just started playing, and I was like, wow, like somebody worked really hard on this.
Okay, appreciate that.
It sounded great.
He did work really hard, and he never lets us forget it.
I think the thing that stuck out to me immediately was on the demo was all the characters have very specific voices. There's a lot of like personality on this team. Do you want to talk a little about the characters?
Yeah, sure. So when we were creating the game, Tyler had worked on a JRPG, or he worked on a lot of RPG Maker games as a young man, which is a fad that I missed, sadly, because that would have been absolutely my jam, but I didn't know anybody who had ever used it. So he had this old old RPG Maker game called Channel Changer that he partially made, as one does with RPG Maker games. You make about 1/3 of it, and then you get a new idea and move on to that. But the idea was he had worked on it. It's like there was like you could play a RPG, and then you would like change the channel, and you'd be in a different genre. So you'd have there'd be like 4 parallel realities where you would change the channel between Western, post-apocalypse, comedy, and real life. Those were like the 4 ideas that he had. And he was like, well, what if we made a game, but like a serious version of this? Because that was like sort of a joke game. And I was like, yeah, sure. Let's go. Let's do it. So I was like, okay, so what can we do with this concept of 4 different stories and 4 different genres of story? And I wanted to stick to, the constraints. Constraints were a really big part of this project, which is like, let's set our constraints before we begin, so that we keep our scope in check and we eliminate a lot of possibilities and don't sort of examine our navels for too long. And so I was like, okay, we'll do a Western, we'll do a post-apocalypse, and we'll do a comedy. We'll do something similar to real life. We didn't stick to those 100%. But Cordelia, the water mage, she's your traditional attack mage. She is in a Western story. She's from the big city. She goes out west. East in her case, but that's how her world works. But she goes out to something that looks very much like the Old West with cowboys and robbers and train robberies and things like that. And she tries to make a name for herself, bringing law to this lawless town. And she is this actually really sort of bookish introverted and very task and rule bound person who tries to bring. But that fits to the whole law premise in a non-traditional way. She's not a macho swaggerer, but she is very much about laws and rules. And so she goes out to the frontier to tame it. She will literally rattle off various citations from the legal codes when she does things to say, yeah, I have the power to do this because I am the highest ranking civil servant here, so I can do X, Y, and Z, and you're all under arrest. So it's sort of a non-traditional application of the lawman in the West. But that is this, the sort of Western story that she's living through. Then we have a more typical character, Nikolai, who is a sergeant in the Auslan army, the army of the Auslan Empire. And he's more your typical JRPG guy in that, he's a soldier. He goes into essentially this post-apocalyptic landscape, a country that's essentially been burned to nothing. It's not the end of the world, but it's definitely the end of that country. And he is assigned to do things to to and around the survivors of this war that he's not comfortable with. And again, like I said, very JRPG, but that drives his conflict and what happens to him in the game. But he's like, being a sergeant, he's very outspoken, extroverted, and task-oriented. So he is what you imagine a sergeant to be. Maybe not quite a hard ass, like your typical drill sergeant, but more like a working sergeant in the field who's like, we have a job to do. We are going to do our job. I am not interested in a lot of complaints. We need to figure out a way to get this done. But then again, at the same time, why am I doing this? I'm really good at getting things done, but the things I have to get done are they worth doing? What's my role in this? So that's his struggle. Then we have the comedy story, which is Ben the cook. Ben is a kind of a slightly portly cook who is very irreverent and lives a very ordinary life in a modern city. Until one day he accidentally manifests tremendous magical power, as one does when one's a JRPG protagonist. And he accidentally blows up his restaurant. And that's a problem. He's now unemployed. Doesn't hurt anybody in the process, but he's completely unemployed. And he's like, well, nobody will hire me to be a cook because they think I might blow up their restaurant, just like I did already. So I'm going to have to be like a hero now. I'm going to have to go around earning my rent money as a hero. And so he gets involved in a series of misadventures for earning his rent money, where he's trying to use this magic and he doesn't really know how to control it. He slowly learns how to control it, but as he's learning to control his magic, he also starts to learn how his world works, because he's never really been involved with sort of the more meaningful processes of how does magic work in a society? What are the laws governing it? Who are the people that make the law and actually apply it? Because if you have people who can suddenly just become mighty wizards all of a sudden, society needs to have a mechanism for dealing with that. And as he discovers what that mechanism is, he learns sort of some of the unsettling things about how a society could function if anyone could get magic at any time. He sort of discovers that things are much more serious for him than he imagined. But it is still a very much a lighthearted and comedic story. And then the last story is Alexandra, the shop girl. She's just a kind of handy shop girl who runs her family's corner store in a modern city where people think magic doesn't exist anymore. All three of their stories are really about magic. And the people in those countries, they'll take place in different countries. And all the other three stories are I'm going to use my magic to do this. And people are abusing magic over here. And this war is about magic and the laws are about magic and all of that. Magic is everything. But in Alexandra's country, people think of magic stopped existing a long time ago. And they think, some more educated people think, oh, well, we know that some magic still exists, like wild animals in distant parts of the world are able to use magic. But human beings stopped being able to use magic, at least in our country, a very long time ago. And we've moved on to technology from there. And so it's her world is, her country and her city are very much something like our world was in the late 1950s or early 1960s. So it's refrigeration and telecommunication are starting to become widespread. There's mass transit and manufacturing and all of those things. And but Alexandra finds herself in a situation where her mother, the owner of the family store, falls into a coma suddenly. And in order to pay for the bills to take care of her, Alexandra has to work with her brother, who's sort of a small-time gangster, and they're just ripping off other gangs' warehouses for money. She's not thrilled with it, but it's the only way that she can make ends meet for her and pay for her mother's 24/7 care. So she finds herself in some increasingly sticky situations with this sort of gang underworld of her city. And then on one of these jobs, she discovers a magical deck of cards that sort of starts to show her another world that most people think doesn't exist. And she also starts to be haunted by a ghost who seems to really want something from her, something very dangerous and something that may threaten her life. So she is not really sure what's going on because, again, she doesn't think she lives in a world with magic, but then magical things start to happen to her, and she has to sort of figure out how to deal with that and who she can ally with to protect her from this whole world she knew nothing about.
Okay, awesome. And then, so another thing that really stuck out about your game is it's so clean looking. Like all the menus are very organized. I immediately knew exactly how to like equip items. Like everything was straightforward. I loved that there was the turn order on the right side. I loved the ability to like swap out the characters in and out. I loved that when you have characters like quote unquote on the bench, they still gain level. So if you want to like switch in and out, you can do that without ending up with really low level characters that basically become unusable.
Related to that switching too, I really like how that's implemented in your game because it's when you have 8 party members that you're trying to keep track of all simultaneously, things can get very overwhelming very quickly. It's a lot of data to intake and then manage. But the way that it's implemented doesn't feel too complicated. It's real easy to keep track of everybody's health, their mana. And I really like the mana system too, that I'm not having to constantly worry about expending mana. It's made to be spent, because I've definitely played some RPGs where it's like, you have 100 mana and this takes 45% of it. And I'm like, gotcha. So never use that? Never. Well, I'll never use that then. But you guys really incentivize using big skills and then just rotating your party members to accommodate that.
It's great to hear you say that, because that's literally like our design goals, like per verbatim. The AP system was actually worked on in our last RPG, Shadows of Adam, and we brought it to this game. The regeneration that you get every turn is a little bit less than it was in SOA, because in SOA you had 4 characters and that was it. But yeah, it was very much I wouldn't call this a quote unquote problem, because every game is just designed for different experiences. But there's a lot of hoarding mana in older RPGs, and we wanted you to just sort of be able to rock and roll at all times. And in designing skills that were interesting and qualitatively different and fun to use, and with the 8 characters, especially with the bench, as you called it, which is a great term for it, they're actually regaining more AP in the back. That's sort of like a hidden buff they get. So yeah, the idea was that, you shouldn't have to hoard your mana. You should be able to always be able to use skills. And with swapping especially, there's always going to be someone in the back who's fresh, ready to go. And I wanted that to feel fun. And so I'm just really happy to hear you say that. It's a tough thing to balance for sure, because, some skills do need to cost more than others. But nothing should be like prohibitively expensive to where you're like, I ain't going to use this until the boss. Like, no, use it for everything. Because as play through Quartet, just basic attacking is going to get less and less effective, to a point where, like, maybe by the midway, 3/4 away, it's like, if you're attacking, you're probably going to die. Like, because in a lot of Final Fantasies, you could spam attack. I love Final Fantasy games, but I would say, I don't know if that's a flaw. That's just what the games were. So that's why we price the skills the way we did. That's why we have the AP region system we do, to hopefully encourage people like, hey, I don't need to hoard my mana. I can use spells. And so,
yeah, it also, I liked some of the things that I didn't have to do. Like when I see that experience screen and everybody levels up together, I'm like, I really hope I don't have to go assign stats to 8 characters.
Yeah, I mean,
and I don't think
game.
I had to. And then there was one other thing that I was thinking about that. Now I can't remember, but that's fine.
Yeah. I mean, every game's different, and we were like Pat had mentioned, like we had a lot of pre-production, a lot of like constraints we placed on the story and gameplay and our artistic goals for what the game was going to be. And we really try to honor those and use those as kind of guiding principles of every decision sort of works to those aims. And it was really like supposed to be a game that could be fast-paced, played in small chunks, and had some like games that have like complicated skill trees and assigning stats. I love games like that. I love FF10. There was a game RFL that had an interesting stat assigned skill system that was pretty interesting, but that's just not the game we're making. And also to your point about heroes in the back row still gaining experience. I mean, who hasn't played FF10 and gotten to that infamous Kamari battle? And you're like, oh shit, I haven't used Kamari once the whole game. And you just can't beat that damn boss.
I haven't played that one, but one we've talked about on one of our other episodes was Lord of the Rings: The Third Age. Mm-hmm. And there's a character that's it's a great RPG, but there's a character named Idriel in that and your entire party does not gain experience if you're not using them. But she gets abducted at one point by like a ring wraith and then has to fight a group of orcs by herself. And they're at the level that is appropriate for where you are. And so if you've not used her very much, you are soft locked and may not finish the game.
Yeah, that blows my mind that like just hearing you say that scenario, like my red radar is saying soft lock, soft lock, soft lock. Like you have to think, I mean, look, game development's hard. Yes. I'm not going to say these developers are bad, but like when I hear those things that all my sirens are going off. Like, oh my God, we have to make sure you can't get soft locked here. Because that could be an unwinnable situation.
I think it's a lot safer to take someone away than to force you to use them. It's really the opposite thing. It's like, okay, we're going to take your best character away, and you're going to be in the game with somebody. You have to find somebody else to use for the next 3 hours. That's more manageable. It still can be annoying, but it is more manageable than be like the character you never used. We're going to force you to use them for 3 hours. It's like, oh boy, like
right.
Like at least give me a crutch.
Yeah, I was going to say, at least give me a way to grind it and make sure that it is, in the end, winnable.
Yeah. I like when developers force me to do new things because I frequently discover it's like, oh, this is actually quite nice. And I've learned something new about this game. And my appreciation is deepened. But I don't like it's tough when they force you to use those new things without being able to rely at least partially on other skills or what have you. It's like I don't want to be playing two different games. I want to play one game that takes me on a nice tour of all of its features, but not just like all of a sudden, okay, now you better learn how to play Zerg because the Protoss are off limits.
Yeah, and it sucks when you're punished for information you didn't have. Like you didn't know that was going to happen. So like it's one thing to say like, hey, just try this. We'll kind of ease you into it. It's another thing. It's like, oh, you didn't use that person? Well, sucks to be you.
Mm-hmm. I remembered too, the other quality of life thing I really liked about your game was and this seems, again, like another no-brainer, but I've played a lot of games where it wasn't that way. I liked a lot of the puzzle solving, but then the plot requires you, once you've finished that room, you then have to later go through it the opposite way. And in my head, I was like, am I going to have to solve all these puzzles backwards now? And no, they're just deactivated and you can just walk through.
Yeah, I remember that was, I'm going to call that a Tyler special. I was just like that.
I didn't even argue. I was fine with that.
I was like, we're just going to disable all the puzzles. Just write it into the plot if you want. Kronos can say, hey, I disabled all the puzzles.
I mean, there are certain conventions where we just like, this is a game. People know it's a game. They are not seduced into thinking that this is not a game. So when you have game elements, you can just do things that are gamey.
Yeah.
And as long as it's not too obtrusive, like as long as you kind of make an effort to get it into the plot, which I feel like we do, then people will not complain.
Yeah, we should have a laser section. That's like always the most video gaming thing ever, where you have to like lasers that shoot and then they stop and you have to run in the corridor.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's like the most video game. It never is justified in plot.
It's set in like the year 1750. Somehow there's lasers.
Yeah, that, and then it's like, all right, so this is somebody's base. Like maybe it's the villain's base. It's like, do they do this every time to get in?
Yeah, exactly.
Why are spikes randomly coming out the floor?
Xenosaga 2 was the worst offender for me on that one, where it's like you get into the Ormus ship and you have these like gigantic, brightly colored puzzles, and it's just like, do people work here? Like this is where they work and live. This is like a colony ship. Why do they have these incredibly large, elaborate puzzles in their home?
to make sure they did the trainings. Yeah, so when the company onboarding is like the manuals upon manuals. So this is how you deactivate the spikes. This is how you dodge the lasers. And if you don't do it, you learn pretty quickly who didn't read the manual and did training.
Like, at least ancient ruins have some justification, but this is like somebody's house. Come on.
Well, I just always get annoyed when like you have to go through the dungeon and do all the puzzles, but somehow the villain beat you. Like, did they not deactivate all the puzzles? Did they reactivate it as they deactivated it? Like, oh shit, I got through this. Oh, let me deactivate it or reactivate it so the heroes have to go through it. How does Gary beat the Elite Four before you do? That's what I want to know.
And why didn't they attack you while you're in the middle of the spikes? They're just waiting for you at the end. They're like, no, I want to see if you could do the book trick. But anyway, Saturday morning cliches.
Oh my God.
So you guys talk a lot about like Final Fantasy and stuff. Is that like a really big inspiration for Quartet?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. This game is sort of like if Final Fantasy VI was made in the modern era with quality of life features and a shorter campaign for adults and slightly more mature subject matter. Not that Final Fantasy VI is particularly juvenile. I would actually think it's one of the more serious Final Fantasies overall. But it's more aimed at people who played Final Fantasy VI when they were kids. If they wanted to play something like it now, this would be the thing.
It's funny because just the other day we were talking with another friend of the podcast, Shane, and he was saying that when he goes to play games now, he's always looking at like what the duration is for completion times, and that helps him determine like what games he puts on his lists.
Exactly. I mean, even YouTubers don't have unlimited amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah. The one I always cite as my one that was just too much for me was Xenoblade Chronicles 2.
Oh my God, dude.
Like I played maybe 30 or 40 hours of that and then decided like, I was like, I don't feel like I'm making any progress. So I just Googled how long are just the cutscenes in this game all added together. It was like 14 hours of cutscenes or something, or maybe even longer than that. And I was just thinking, I am never gonna finish this. And that's not a bad thing either. Like I definitely appreciate really long games and really long stories and things that take their time, but not everything needs to be that.
I mean, 14 hours is a season of television, right? Yeah. That's like if you think about it, like even that's like a season of broadcast television, even too, because like 28 episodes of 24 minutes of content is that's easily there. So it's like that's crazy. I mean, you better have a good plot and better be compelling,
and they do.
I mean, they take their time getting there. I couldn't make it through it either. I think
Xenoblade.
Yeah, Xenoblade 2. It was just like, all right, can we have some stakes? Can we accelerate this maybe a little bit?
Yeah, I got 60 hours in and I was just toast. Like I can't do any more of this. I was just.
All right, I'm glad I'm not alone.
I'm out. No, I have the same problem. I don't want to get into a rant about the Xenoblade Chronicles 2, but didn't love the game. Sorry if anyone listening is a fan. That's cool. You do you.
Mm-hmm. Some people are like made for those long 300-hour plus games.
I mean, I beat Persona 5 and then Dragon Quest 11 back to back. So I've definitely played long games, but that was before my son was born. So, if I wanted to beat Persona 5 now, it'd probably take me 4 years. I mean, you think I'm joking? I've been trying to beat Trails in the Sky. It's been 2 years since I started the game. I'm still not done. But I also hate that game too. So I play about 30 minutes and then I'm like, I can't do anymore. But I'm going to beat it.
Are you super into the Trails series? Is that the?
No. So our programmer, Peter, he's huge Trails culture
huge
guy.
Fan.
And it's actually great because Pat and I are big Final Fantasy, Squaresoft, Golden Age guys. And, I branched out, Grandia, a little bit of Breath of Fire, but, mostly Final Fantasy was my jam. But it's nice to have Pete on the team because he brings a perspective about, he's literally played every JRPG ever made. It's crazy, but he's got a good perspective on some of those games that I don't or Pat doesn't. And it's helpful to hear that. Even if I don't particularly love the Trails games that I played, it's always helpful just to consider things because, it can only make you a better developer, I think.
Mm-hmm. So obviously you guys are in like the middle lower end of your Kickstarter. Mm-hmm. So do you guys have like an anticipated release date? Is it entirely based on the Kickstarter, like the success of that?
If people want to give us a lot more money, then yeah, we'll probably hire more people. Absolutely. We will spend it all on the game. None of us is getting a nose job from this Kickstarter.
You could probably use one though, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. This thing, I can open doors with it and also not breathe. It's amazing. Ireland. It's probably late 2022. Towards maybe November or December.
At least be in beta by then.
Yeah, we'll have a pretty robust beta at that point, which you can play if you're a backer. That's something we have open. We have set aside. We want to do 3 months of beta because we want people to be able to play it and give us feedback, and we want to release the best possible product. So if the beta drags out the development process, that's good. If something else does, we're trying to avoid that. We're trying to not get too stuck on anything. The game is actually 90% programmed because in order to create a demo for a JRPG, you have to have all the systems working, like all that nice clean UI. That was all our pixel artist, Tim, and our programmer, Peter, having a bunch of conversations where Tyler and I didn't understand anything that they were saying about prefabs and Unity and alignments and all this stuff and transparencies. And I had no idea what they were talking about, but they spent a solid month just making that stuff line up. And that's great because Tim is, of course, a professional artist full time. And Peter is just the pixel whisperer. He can just tell when alignments are off by 1 pixel. I literally can't. And my visual acuity will not tell me that information. So that's the sort of thing that we spent time on already. And that's done. It's out of the way. We don't have to do that again. Thank God. So we're just going to make content.
Yeah. And making content is actually quite easy because we spent a long time pre-production making systems and building tools that will make it very easy to make content.
It is, however, expensive.
Right. Art is expensive.
The art, yeah. Our artists are really good. That's why the game looks good, but they command high wages as a result of that.
Right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So what platforms are you guys hoping to release on?
So I'll take this question. So obviously we'll be on Windows, Mac, Linux. So console ports is something we really want to do. And it's currently a stretch goal for Kickstarter because just to offer a console keys as a reward of your pledge to our Kickstarter, it requires us to buy keys directly from the publishers. And so I think just talking about it might kind of shed a little bit of the mystery behind it. I imagine regardless of whether we hit certain console stretch goals, that we will probably eventually hit those stretch goals. We just couldn't offer it as a said reward for your pledge. But I'm feeling pretty confident we're very close to hitting our funding goal. I'm feeling like we're going to hit that surge at the end, knock on wood, and we're going to hit at least our Switch. But yeah, we'd love to get the Switch and PS4. Other consoles to be determined. My previous game, Shadows of Adam, was on Steam, came out in 2017, and basically came out 2 years later on Switch. And so in half the time, almost matched the sales that we had on PC that we had on Switch. So my point being is that Switch is super hot for RPGs, and PlayStation does pretty well for us too. So yeah, we'd love to get console ports. But if you want to pledge and help us get there early and get a copy for your pledge, then we got to hit those stretch goals.
Because Nintendo's
keys aren't cheap.
Nintendo's you got to pay us our cut of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you got to buy 5. If say we hit 800 Kickstarter backers, and 500 of them want a Switch key, which that might actually be about the number it is, because we have a choice. Then we have to buy 500 keys from Nintendo, and that costs a little bit of money. And so we budgeted our goal to be, what do we need to get all the art and sound we need done to make this game? And then we had to add a little extra for the stretch, say, okay, how much would we need if we got the console goal to offer keys for people to buy them from Nintendo or Sony? So, but yeah, that's basically the long and short of it. I hope that makes sense to everyone.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I didn't know that developers had to buy keys. I thought that you guys could generate those or something.
Well, you can't for Steam.
Yeah, for Steam it's nice. Gabe Newell doesn't need our money.
That's true.
Steam is actually one of the best I really like Steam as a platform. It's very easy to get builds up. It's very easy to make patches. It's very difficult to get patches on Switch and Sony. It's just the bureaucracy and the layers to it, and even just to develop for the Switch without a publisher is challenging. But like you put something on Steam and there's a bug, you can get a patch out in 30 minutes, easy. Get a patch out on Nintendo Switch. You could be looking at a week, 2, 3. It just depends. So
you better pray it's not Golden Week.
Oh my God! One day I'll tell you all that story. It was not a Golden Week for me. It's like 10
solid days of like a Japanese person will not respond to you.
Yeah. Anyway, that's a story for another day, another podcast, maybe.
When do you think people, like, let's say on Steam, do you know when you'd expect to maybe have a demo up there, or maybe you already do? I'm not sure.
It's a great question, actually. I'm not sure we put a lot of thought into it. I mean, we will have different layers of demos. Like, we want to have a demo that's mostly the introductory chapters that you can choose from, and then obviously we want to have an alpha and a beta. That'll be really important for testing. There's a way to get access to that through the Kickstarter. And as far as a public-facing demo, I'm not sure. There's like kind of data that's just different levels of how good a demo can do for you, if it's smart to put a demo out, how long you should put a demo out. So that's just stuff we have to review. For people who join our Discord, we'll probably always share little builds with folks as we can, or at least shots. But I would say probably no major demo releases that will be public. I mean,
the one we have is probably going to stand, and then we're going to probably retract that demo not too long after the Kickstarter. I mean, people can still play it now for free. There's no commitment to play it, but I mean, some of the preliminary data about demos for indie says that, like, don't overexpose and don't leave your demo up forever. We don't know why that causes risks for games, but it does, and we want to preserve a little bit of the mystery. And but although unless you're a beta backer, in which case you can play all of the content as soon as it's ready.
Yeah, we're going to have a pretty robust beta. I mean, for our last title, we had beta for at least 3-4 months, and it was very, very helpful. It's just, as developers, you can't anticipate all the ways your players are going to play your game. Sometimes you get tunnel vision. I know. I probably played that demo area that we released about 100 times. And so you just start kind of like unable to see other ways to play the game. And it wasn't until like I brought it to a conference in DC area and I just watched about 100 people play the game. And I was like, oh yeah, you could do that. I didn't even think about that. Like, it's really helpful. And watching streamers and people who've done videos of the demo on YouTube, like, that's very helpful. So we'll definitely have a robust beta, and that'll be something I hope people want to support us with.
Definitely. I know I'm pretty excited to play more after I thought it was a cliffhanger. Not everyone might, but I was pretty excited to keep going. When the demo ended, I was disappointed. So I'm definitely excited to continue.
We absolutely want to leave you wanting more. So sorry, but not sorry.
Now that's the art. That's the mark of a good show, in my opinion. I played in a band once, and in my opinion, they did too much encores. I always thought, like, my philosophy is like, leave people wanting a little bit more. Don't leave them feeling exhausted. I guess maybe there's a place to make people so exhausted that they don't want to, like, consume your art anymore. And, like, just always leave a little bit of room for something more. I think that's important.
Mm-hmm. The Nikolai getting the book was particularly annoying.
Yeah.
That'll pay off. There's a big arc there. That'll pay off in a big way. But
he got the official Quartet player's guide.
Yeah, that's what he's picked up. He's like, I didn't know this boss had a weakness to sleep.
It's like, damn it, this boss is strong against fire. Swap me out.
I'm going to go get a beer.
So we can wrap it up here. Is there any final last-minute thoughts to give the listeners?
I actually have one more thing that I think we should do too, is if our listeners are listening after your Kickstarter has ended, what is the best way for them to support you?
That's a great question. We have a pretty active Twitter account. It's something classic, but it's CLASSC, no I, or our Discord server, which all the developers are really active in. And we have like a really wonderful community. I say this all the time, but I truly mean it. It's like a really great community of independent developers, programmers, artists, et cetera. And that's just discord.gg/somethingclassic with an I. Those are the best place to find us, Twitter or Discord. And seriously, if you're interested in game development, please join our Discord. I get such a joy out of helping other developers because I want everyone to succeed. I want everyone to meet people who have creative passion. I mean, that's how I started my game development journey, was in the RPG Maker community, just hanging out with buddies, like making terrible games together. That's how you learn. And that community is so important, that network. So please join our Discord if you have any interest. If you just want to talk about Quartet or whatever, and you're not a game maker, that's cool too. You can just hang out. But that's those two places. Yeah. And you could just keep PayPaling me money if you want.
Yeah, it's it will go towards the development of the game one way or another.
Mm-hmm. All right. So, any final thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, I'd say if you were looking for a game that was like the SNES and early PS1 era JRPGs, Quartet is supposed to be taking that species of game into the modern era. I mean, we are one of many that do that, but we're not pioneering anything here. But we're just trying to do something like that and do it really well and show that it's still a viable art form. But if that's your jam, then you'll like it. It's not necessarily going to be a game for absolutely everybody. It's definitely a game for JRPG enthusiasts. But if that's your thing, then you should check it out.
Yeah. And if you have any reservations, please try our demo out.
Yeah,
it's
try the demo
for anyone to play. And
30, 40 minutes.
Yeah. And if it makes anyone feel better, we've done a Kickstarter before. We've released the game before. So like we have a little bit of a pedigree as far as getting stuff done, releasing products in the market. And but yeah, please try the demo and we'd love to hear what you think. And this was a great podcast. Appreciate all the questions.
Well, thanks for coming on. And maybe once the game's finally out, we'll have a full episode where I finally get to talk about whatever that Nikolai's doing with that book.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There are no setups that don't pay off. That's one of the things I was committed to, and Tyler whipped me about.
Yeah, this guy ain't no J.J. Abrams.
Yeah.
Oh,
let's build up to nothing.
I've got some feelings there.
I'm gonna make a sequel to Quartet. And I'm just gonna retcon everything Pat sets up.
It was all a dream.
It wasn't a quartet. It was a quintet.
I don't know. It sounds like it from the ghost that's haunting. That I think it was Andrea. You said like if that ghost is always there.
Well, we'll see. That'll pay off too. Yeah, that's a big quest in the end too. I promise. All the loose ends.
That's actually Luke Skywalker force projecting his.
Yeah, but well, so like we have an IP deal. It was supposed to be a secret, but now that we've broken NDA.
All right.
But thank you guys for hosting us.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Oh, yeah, no problem. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah.
And thanks for everybody. This is actually our bonus episode because we're between our season 1 and season 2. So this is just sort of a little extra thing that we're putting out into the universe for you guys. So thanks, everybody, for listening. And we will be back when season 2 starts, which I believe is in December. Bye.
Bye, guys.
Thanks. Bye.